Hello and welcome to this very important discussion based on the presumption of death process. This evening, we're joined by myself and my colleague Josie. We'll introduce ourselves in just a moment. We're also very fortunate to be joined by some family members who either have experience of the presumption of death process or are considering that route. So this will just be basically an introduction to that process based on the experiences of some of the people in the room this evening. So just to kick us off, I just want to briefly do some introductions. I'm Emily Rawlinson. I am Missing People's peer support manager, sitting within the family support team. And my role really is to act in support of people who are impacted and left behind by a disappearance. So I work with family, friends, and carers of missing people to try and support them through their experience. So if it's okay, if I just hand over to Alan, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Hello, yes, I'm Alan Smith. I have a brother who disappeared approximately 38 years ago, and we went through the presumption of death process a few years ago, and we will be sharing my experience of that process in this conversation.
Thank you, Alan. And if I just move on to Josie, just because you're the next person on my screen, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
I'm Josie Allen. I'm the head of policy and partnerships at the charity Missing People. My predecessors in my role actually campaigned alongside families for introduction of this legislation, and I've worked with a number of families over the years who have gone through the process. So I'm here to help hopefully add some insight into the conversation and also just make sure that we cover everything that might be helpful for families.
Thank you, Josie. And if I just move on to yourself, Mohammed.
Yes, my name is Mohammed Ali. I'm living in Sussex, and it's my wife Fatima Mohammed Ali, who's been missing since 2016. There's no clue or anything, and I'm looking at how to navigate the process of presumption of death. And I'm glad that Alan is coming to help us to study how the process will work. For me, it may be different for different families, but I'm hoping that I can navigate as easily as I can.
Thank you, Mohammed. And last but certainly not least, we've got Ali.
I'm Mohammed's son. I don't live with Mohammed, but I live in London. But yeah, just here to learn the process as well. And yeah, no, the tools.
Um, Very broad question, yeah. The Presumption of Death Act, the one that I'm going to talk about applies to England and Wales. Scotland and Northern Ireland have separate relationships, but it was um, back in 2013 that it became a law, and it's been amended slightly since. There are ongoing amendments with most acts of Parliament. And basically, it you have to, in general terms, the missing person must be missing for at least 7 years, unless there are extenuating circumstances, like there's been a natural disaster, like an earthquake, and lots of people were killed and bodies never recovered. But 7 years is the normal length of time, which you can apply for that. You must, again, well, must is not quite right. You should be related in some fashion to the person who's missing, and that's the sort of initial point. Like you can be a spouse, brother, sister, child, parent. But also, it can be done if you're not related, as long as you can demonstrate. I can't remember what the right phrase is, but you have to be able to demonstrate that you have a valid interest in getting this person declared, and and I guess it's a non-financial valid interest as well. That, and you go through a High Court process to get that, go through that, which is fairly well documented on government websites. There's quite a lot of guidance out there to help you through that.
And thank you. That point about 7 years is really important, I think, because it is set out in the legislation that um, it's on the balance of probabilities that someone is most likely to have died, I believe. So after 7 years, the kind of weight of evidence sits more with an assumption that if someone's been completely out of contact and there's no evidence to sort of suggest where they are, that it is more likely that an application would be granted. I have worked with families who have managed to get an application granted before 7 years, where there was enough evidence to suggest that they had most likely died even without that time elapsing. So I worked with one family whose loved one had been missing for less than a year, but because they went missing in a storm at sea, there was enough evidence to suggest it was very unlikely they would have got to safety. So I just wanted to add that it can happen in kind of those individual circumstances. But yeah, you are right that it's a lot more weight on kind of proving what's happened before that point. And can I ask, when you sort of think, or in your experience, when families might consider applying for a presumption of death certificate, what kind of triggered that for you, or what might be the moment people need to think about that?
For us, it was triggered by we'd looked at it on several occasions over the last sort of the 30 years that my brother Donald had been missing. What eventually triggered it is basically, well, our mother was still alive, and she was not keen on going through the process. She did look at it once, but decided against it. And when she died, my other brother and I decided we'd go through this process. Part of the reasoning was didn't want it hanging over, and if I were to die, then it would go on to my children to sort out. So let's get this tidied up, and at least out of the way so that they didn't have to worry about it. And so, yes, we decided to proceed with it. I can't remember exactly when it was, a few years back, and move on that. Unfortunately for us, it was around the time of COVID. So it was actually took a lot longer as a result of COVID than it should really have done.
The only thing that I'm getting a little bit confused, obviously, when I say confused, because I've gone and read many statements on the missing people webpage, the government webpage, and the process seems easy enough, but like you said, that there's a lot of steps you have to take before you present the case, you see, and this is where I will need more help, whatever, to present my case. In other words, there's no financial gain for me or anybody. It's just that, I don't plan to move on with my life in one way because, in my culture, it's a taboo to get remarried or whatever, But I'm just trying to make sure that if something happens to me, there's this house and anything that is in joint name can be managed by the children, however they want to do it.
Yeah. No, that's right, and I think that is important to get that sorted.
Because Islamically, they are saying, that within 9 years, if person is not found anything, you can do a thing called Fatiha. Fatiha means you're pronouncing them dead. My children are refused that at the moment, but we are only doing it legally in this country so that if there's any asset of me and Fatima, the kids will not have to fight in court or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think thank you for sharing your experience of the fact that it might clash with sort of your maybe personal views or cultural views, but you are doing, it has a purpose for you still.
The first thing we did, we got the information that we needed a police report, basically, missing person, you must have a police report. Now, given that it was sort of 35 years since Donald had disappeared, that was not going to be an easy task. So we got in touch with the police and asked them, about producing a report. And their reaction actually was, well, we need to investigate again. We're going through a lot of these cases, and we'll look at this one and see whether we can find anything. And that took the best part of a year for them to do that. And that was partly because of COVID, because of, they were having difficulty getting responses out of various government departments about, lack of, information from HMRC, for example. Sort of, has he done any tax returns or anything like that? Do they have any evidence of life? And so that was then completed around 2021, mid-year. And that was really the first step then to put that together. The other thing we had to put together was an estimate of the estate of my brother. So in other words, the value, what savings he had, what investments or anything like that he had that needed to be there. Again, it's an estimate. Again, that's something which you do, which I think you have to supply. We certainly supplied it. And then just listing the evidence that you've gathered, what happened, when it happened, maybe a bit of history to know what happened beforehand. Was there, my brother kept disappearing and then reappearing. Sort of going through that process of actually saying so that the judge can look at that information. And also, what effort have you put into trying to find him, going through missing people to get them to help you, and any other things. My brother disappeared before missing people existed, so it was initially the Salvation Army had something in place at that time. But and if you've used a private detective or something like that to try and find your wife, then what have they come up with? That sort of thing needs to be documented.
Sorry, Alan, just to check, was that mostly supplied in written statements? Like, did you just kind of write out a timeline of what had happened, or did you, I understand there was obviously the police report that you were able to get access to, but the kind of stuff about sort of history and when your person went missing and things like that?
Yes, I did. I did a sort of listing of all the information I could find, or everything we could recollect, every document anything that was documented listed. We put that into a timeline so that the judge could see what had happened when, basically. And in my brother's case, sort of were there mental health issues and that sort of thing which could have impacted what was going on.
Thank you. And you mentioned sort of getting evidence from missing people. That's absolutely something that we can do, and Mohammed would be happy to explore that with you if you want to. We can provide a statement saying that we have kind of conducted publicity or sought out publicity opportunities for X period of years, and that we have no reason to believe that the person has been found in that time. So it's just a supportive statement, but as Alan says, we can provide that to add kind of that additional evidence if helpful.
Yeah, well, like I say, I mean, I was fortunate enough from day one when it happened. The liaison officer quickly, made contact with missing people. So I think so. The history is there, for me, from day one, from literally from the 12th of February, 2016, So initially, the way Alan explained that we have to get a police report. So obviously that's something should be straightforward because the police have been involved from day one. In the last 4 years, they have not made any communication with me, not even replied to anything. I've phoned them or phones not answered. Requested whether they've looked into the case again and reviewed it again. Nothing's been done in the last 4 years. So it's got to a stage where I personally feel like where I had a very good support in the first 3 years, there's no liaison officer in contact, nothing. It's just like blank.
Yes, what I found there was, as I say, when I contacted the police and said, "Could you give us a statement, please?" They said that's when they sort of activated and said, "Okay, we'll just rerun the checks at this point."
Yeah,
So if they do that, then sort of that may take a little while.
yeah.
But otherwise, if they you just basically say you need a statement from them for the court. I had to work it out actually. Um, hold on a minute. I did write it down somewhere. Uh, Basically, we started in 2019, and the court process finished in 2022.
It's about 3 years.
It's 3 years. However, I would say that, you know, as I say, a lot of that was delays because of COVID. The police were unable to do certain things because of getting information and so on. So the court process itself took from effectively January to June in 2022.
So just a question to you, Alan. So if you lodge that application and if there's any discrepancy, and if the judge or the coroner is not happy about it, is it that it gets rejected or it needs new evidence or whatever?
My experience of it was the judge that I had was very, very helpful, very sympathetic. He wasn't out to try and catch you out at all. And if he needed something, he would say, "I need this from you. I need, so for example, the police report was a bit old. So he said, I need you to go back to various government departments and ask them for, to confirm the evidence that there's nothing has happened with brothers, tax accounts, driving license and that sort of thing. Um, Now, that took a little bit of time. And in fact, some of the government departments refused to respond to me because I wasn't my brother. And so I went back to the judge and he issued court orders to force them to respond to me. So, and he said, if you don't get a response, come back to me and we'll put in court orders, give them 4 weeks to respond. And we'll meet together again in 6 weeks' time to go through it and make sure everything's lined up. The judge said that he was asking us to do these things not because he didn't believe us, but because he needed to have the evidence. He needed up-to-date evidence of no evidence of life, basically.
Yeah.
He needed the evidence that there were, and he basically said it was to cover himself as much as it was to cover us.
But how can they be convinced that there's no life? Because like my wife's case, there's not a clue, there's nothing. It's 10 years, so
Well, it's basically, as I say, they will, you have to get from HMRC something which says they've had no correspondence with her for the last 10 years, from driving vehicle licensing, from the passport office, from the NHS, and I can't. There were 5 or 6 different government departments you have to go through to get that evidence. I can't remember all of them off the top of my head.
also they have to send you the details from safe arguments from passport office that she's not applied for any application
Yeah,
in the last
she's
10
not.
years or whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
no, that's fine. That's fine because, like I said, she left everything here. In fact, I've got everything here.
Mm.
Her license, her passport, and whatever.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's just that they have no record of any activity on her account accounts as it were. So um,
And does that include the banks and work history and everything?
I really don't know the answer to that one because
Okay.
well
I'll,
that wasn't something that I had to worry about.
okay. Because she
Uh,
was employed, and then that was it. She just went,
Yeah,
and that's it.
I mean, it wouldn't do any harm to get statements from the employer and banks if you can get them.
Yeah, I think
Uh,
so. If I remember, I might have it in the file. We did receive a letter from her employer saying that it's almost been a month, and because she's classed as a missing person, we are terminating the employment.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Okay. It's just
Um,
yeah,
it's just knowledgeable to know everything before we go
yeah.
and put.
I would say anything you've got like that, include it as part of the evidence that you send in. Uh,
Okay.
it, it's any small thing
Yeah.
which confirms the history, if you like, of
Yeah.
what actually happened.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
I
That's
think
good. Okay.
similarly, the police report will obviously, if the police provide it correctly, they should be providing a statement saying we've made every effort to find Fatima and there has been no evidence. And that's where this 7 year rule comes in again. That there's sort of an assumption that if there's been no contact and no evidence of life in more than 7 years, that does indicate that someone may have passed away. Whereas if you were applying much, much sooner, maybe there'd be a bit more of an emphasis on you having to kind of prove what happened or that there's
Mm.
very clear evidence that they died. Whereas I think the assumption is that if there's no signs of life, no contact, that that kind of does provide somewhat of an answer to the judge as long as there's enough evidence to show that.
I think the question is about the publication. When you say it has to be recent, obviously my mom's gone through quite a few like press releases and stuff. How recent does it need to be? Is like in the last couple of years okay, or is it has to be from the point of
Well, it
contact?
depends what you're talking about. If it's evidence from a government department, then that must be recent, as in a few months old. If it's a history of these are the adverts that we've made, these are the so on that we've done, then that's whatever, however old it is. In terms of the legal requirement to put a notice in a newspaper, that has to be at the time the case starts.
Did you actually had to have a lawyer or somebody to help you, or
I I I looked for local lawyers around where I live in Southampton, and basically it was very difficult, if not impossible, to find somebody who'd got experience of doing this sort of thing. I did engage one lawyer very briefly, but found myself teaching him about the process as opposed to him guiding me through the process.
yeah?
Um, he did give me a case study from one case report, which actually was somebody representing themselves in the High Court to go through this. And when we first did the application, the judge gave me exactly the same case study and said, "Look at this. This is what we need to go through. This is how you need to address all these things." So, the same guidance was there. So, no, I gave up on the solicitor because it was going to involve as much work for me as it would do if I did it myself, I felt.
It's only
Uh,
because looking at a lot of cases or my wife's disciplines and everything, I'm just surprised there's no legal firm or legal organization to help navigate the family other than the missing people who are helping us.
Well, I think it would be unfair to say that there aren't solicitors who know what they're doing. It depends.
No, I mean, there are. I mean, I did make some one or two inquiries, but I got very, very negative response from them. Yeah, either
Yeah,
they didn't want to take they didn't want to take the case, if you want to put it that way,
yeah,
or whether it was like for them it wouldn't have been worth it or whatever. If that's how
yeah,
I
yeah,
want to put it,
yeah.
And
I mean, the other thing that cropped up with mine was I spoke to the solicitor, and he then, gave me a quote as to how much his time would cost, and then sort of a day or two later said, "Oh, I forgot to say, I can't represent you in court. You'll have to have a barrister." So that almost doubled the cost.
mm.
In some ways, I felt, well, maybe what I should have done in retrospect is said, I don't want to be represented in court. I'll do that myself. What I want you to do is put all the evidence
To
together
get
in
together, yeah,
such a way that the court will accept the evidence. I will send the evidence to court. You just do the donkey work for me.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And yes, okay, it's quite expensive donkey work, but it's at least it might have helped a bit if that had been put together by a solicitor rather than by me. But no, that would be another approach: is get somebody with a legal background, solicitor, to actually put the evidence together in a way that the court would accept, and then dispense with them once that they've done that, send the stuff in yourself.
So
Submit.
initially, you recommend they use a solicitor to put the.
I, in retrospect, that's what I should possibly have considered, is all I would say. But I mean, I don't think in actual fact it made that much difference, to be honest, when I did it myself. I
You
mean,
manage to navigate, okay.
yeah, I managed to navigate okay. And as I say, the judge basically said, I need this. Please can you try and get hold of this for me? I need this to really have something that's up to date rather than something which is a year or two old.
Mohammed, just one other thing I wanted to flag is that we do have access to some pro bono legal support as a charity. So we wouldn't necessarily be able to find someone that would be able to go through the whole process with you. But it just made me think of it when Alan was saying if you just need someone to kind of review one stage of the process or to review your kind of evidence that
Mm.
you've brought together, please do think like just ask us and we might be able to find someone that would be able to give that kind of insight even if they wouldn't be able to represent you.
The process itself is well documented and straightforward, I would say. Um, it's not necessarily easily from an emotional perspective as opposed to a legal perspective. So, things will come up which sort of I felt at times, sort of quite emotionally stressed. So just be aware that that may happen.
Because looking at the government guideline, I mean, when you read through the government guideline, it seems simple enough. But what I find it that it could be uncharted territory. That if you lodge the application, it also requires you to make public announcement on newspapers and all that sort of thing. Did
Yeah,
you have
yeah.
to do that? Did you have to do that?
Oh yes, yes. Just a word of warning on that one.
Yeah,
Finding
I appreciate
finding local
any help I
newspaper
get.
finding local newspapers can be quite challenging these days. It has to be in the area in which they
Yeah.
know a resident disappeared, and a lot of local newspapers have closed down. So that was actually turned out to be more of a challenge than that. And it's yeah, you just take the wording that they give you and just fill in the blanks and get the newspaper to publish that. It will also almost certainly appear electronically online. in their web-based version of the newspaper. I suspect that, and that was perfectly adequate as far as the judge was concerned. You had done it. Just a word of warning there. You have 7 days in which to publish it
from
once the
lodging the application.
yeah, yeah. From the judge saying, yes, we're going ahead with
Okay.
this. Yes.
Alan, I think one of the other expectations that goes along with the notice in the newspaper is informing other or interested parties, I think they refer to it as,
Yes, yes.
about you making the application. So that's informing, is it all other family, immediate family members, or?
It's effectively immediate family members. Yes, you have to serve notice on all so you'd have to, if you were doing it, Mohammed, for example, you'd have to serve notice on your sons that you're doing this. And again, it's a document which is provided, and you then just have to send it out, and they have to acknowledge receipt of it. There is a process there which I can't remember exactly how it works, but you can do it I think you do it through the court website, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think so. I did notice that document which says that you got to serve notice to immediate family or interested party of Fatima, as well.
Yeah, yeah. So if she's got siblings, it may include siblings
Yeah.
of hers as well as your children.
Okay.
What if the siblings are not in the UK?
I don't think that matters.
Doesn't
I
matter.
mean, I'm not sure though. You can send it you can send it electronically. You don't have to post it, and they just have to acknowledge that they've received it. If they're not in the UK and they don't acknowledge it, I have
Okay.
no idea what would happen then. But
So this
Yeah,
is when you say siblings, is Fatima siblings or
yes, yes,
okay, because she's only got one surviving brother,
She's
yeah,
got, she's
From
got,
what
that's
I,
fine. I mean,
yeah,
yeah,
sorry, from what I understand from what you've said, Alan, it seems to be that anyone who would be an interested party of Fatima, essentially someone that's related to her, so immediate, people that she's blood related to, it sounds like,
or married to, or
or
was
married
married.
to, yeah.
For example, Ali was doing it, he'd have to provide it to Mohammed. So, um, yes, basically anybody who might claim an interest in it. You don't have to go as far as cousins, as
Okay.
far as I'm aware. I certainly didn't. But yeah, basically, the only other person I had to serve it on was my brother.
Yeah.
Also, just one thing that I've just remembered from a conversation I had with someone previously, and Alan, I don't know if this was the case for you, but a woman I met who applied for presumption of death and again did it without legal representation. She got the feedback of just really basic that she needed to label everything in what she supplied as evidence. So it needed to have kind of a title and a page number and just be really clear so that the judge could sort of see exactly what they were getting.
Yeah,
And I thought that was such a simple thing, but she ended up having to go back for a second hearing because she had provided kind of a load of paperwork, but it wasn't in order, it wasn't labeled, it wasn't titled, it didn't have page numbers, and therefore the judge didn't really feel like they could sort of assess what was there. So I just thought I'd pass that on as a really, really basic thing of just any evidence you have, kind of having it really clearly set out and in order, so that it feels like as simple as possible.
So when you go up and down through the process of any miscalculation, going to judge, and then he's telling you to do something, is there is there a cost that involves that you have to keep paying to the government or the court?
the
Court fee?
court, from memory, there was a relatively small payment at the beginning of the case, which I know then had to pay I think it's something like, I can't remember, 500, £600
Yeah,
for the
it's about
total
700
thing.
something. Yeah, initial. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's it. You don't pay any more than that to the court.
Okay.
So if it goes on, I think I ended up with three hearings,
Okay.
And there was no additional cost per hearing or anything like that. It was just a one-off charge.
It's only then in case if you didn't present your documents properly, and if they want more, then you just have to go back and forth. That's what it is.
Yes, yeah, that's basically
Yeah.
the,
Right. And every time they issue these court orders for any reason, are there any costs involved?
what the court orders.
Yeah.
The only costs involved there are you posting the stuff to
Oh,
the.
okay. So it's just a normal. I mean, because I mean, you get conflicting views and hearing that it's mostly the court fees, which is fair enough, because
Yeah,
obviously
it's. I mean, the only thing we were charged with the court fees, and then a small amount to get the certificate of presumption of death. But those were the only charges there. Otherwise, it was yes, signed for delivery postage, which is
yeah,
obviously comes up it's not
no,
hugely expensive, but it's not cheap.
no,
Um, can't remember what else there was really, but that was mainly it was mainly those sorts of costs,
mm,
and the cost of publishing is not cheap either. The newspaper thing, it's not like putting an advert in. It's they have a much higher charge, shall we say, for putting in a notice
yeah,
like
yeah.
that.
So I just want to bring this conversation to a close. It's clearly a detailed process, and I'm sure we could talk about it for many more hours. But I just want to thank everyone who's been involved with this discussion today, especially Alan, Ali, and Mohammed. We're very much aware that obviously this has been a discussion about legal and practical matters around a loved one being missing, but this is also deeply personal. You're sharing aspects of your experience in a public way, and we recognise that. Yeah, thank you, Alan, for being so thoughtful with
Yeah,
your
thank you very much.
questions. I think, you know, you have a huge amount of knowledge, and we really appreciate you sharing that today. And thank you, Mohammed and Ali,
Yeah,
for being part of the planning for this conversation and representing families who may be in similar positions to yourselves, perhaps considering whether this is the right route for them. So I just want to end by saying that when this video is uploaded to the Missing People website, there will be a link to further information that the charity has created. So this is very much an introduction. Help, as hopefully has been picked up through this conversation, help is available from the charity if families are choosing to go down this path. And there will be details about how to access our support with this video as well. So all that remains is just to say a big thank you to you all for
thank you
taking
very much.
part.
Thank you very much, Josie. Thank you, Emily,
Yes,
and thank you, Alan.
And thank you for organising it. I think
Yeah,
hopefully
thank you.
it
It's
will
very, very,
help
very
more
informative,
people.
and hopefully you can help everybody.